Everyone. Hopefully all who are still there on Zoom can hear me. So, as you know, I am Sophia McKeever. As Philip mentioned, I spoke at last year's PNSQC. And to give you a little context about what I'm about to talk about today, I actually submitted two different topics. The one that actually got admitted was about the artistic nature of the work that we do and how you can use that in the lens of artistic appreciation in order to build relationships in your team. It was called Art and Code and Quality. It's actually published in the book as well. So feel free to read that at your leisure. So today, I'm going to talk about the other option that I had submitted and talk to you specifically about a UI automation paradigm that I call Hybrid Page Object Logical Function. And I colloquially call this, the automagical marvel, because it basically gives you the ability to work with your page elements same way that you would standard data types. So let's go ahead and start talking about this. So let's define what this paradigm actually is. We're going to start by breaking down what page object and what logical function models are. We'll start with logical function model. So logical function model is basically a collection of functions used to produce logical results. Some might also call this functional programming. Its design consists of functions to perform actions on a page. Each function would call the elements and either use it individually or call multiple references or multiple elements at the same time. And depending on how you build your code, you're probably going to repeat a lot of your instances of these objects and having areas where you're always going to have to update and continue to update. And it also requires the large in-depth knowledge to actually get working even just on your basic tests. You have to know how to work with your driver, your element, your whatever the library you're using, be it Selenium, XDUI, or Game Driver, whatever. This is a test built on a logical function. So as you can see here, maybe you can see the code, maybe you can't. It might be a little small, but don't worry. As you can see here in the code, we have multiple different references to the same element here. So in this case, as you can see if I can zoom in there. There we go. As you can see, we have first name referenced many times, last name referenced many times. What is this even doing? Do you even know? I don't know. If you code your test like this, by the way, please don't. There are many places to update, as I said. So basically, you're going through and updating each one of those anytime your developers change your elements. Low readability, like I said, what is this doing? I don't know. Do you know? Can you tell me? I don't know. And in this bottom area, you have a test that's calling a test, which is a big no-no, but here we are. This is the code that they chose to write. You have a couple of sleeps that pad out the runtime. And it's just ultimately a bad design. So let's talk a little bit about what page object means. So page object model, and this definition comes directly from Selenium's documentation, is an object-oriented class that serves as an interface for your application to the test. Its design consists of object models representing pages, sheets, panes, whatever you want to call them. Each page object has functions tied to it to interact with that UI. Pages may have additional functions built in to make interaction easier. In the framework itself is definitely robust, but still requires a lot of that in-depth knowledge to even just build your tests. You have to know how to interact with your functions or with your elements. You have to know how to interact, how the driver itself interacts with those elements in order to actually build your test. Benefit though is that you update once you fix everything. So you'll have one reference for your first name, you go and update that, boom. You don't have to update anything else. So let's take a look at the test built on this, and don't worry, we'll zoom in again. But in this case, it's as I said, update once, fix everywhere. It's simple to read and understand. So if I were to go ahead and zoom in on this code, it's easier to say, okay, I'm filling out the first name with Amelia, set a last name with Bedelia, validating that those are set, so on and so forth. Going through, working with these elements. Sometimes when you're working with a page object model, you might actually have to reference the driver and capture an element that maybe your framework didn't capture, as you can see right here. Zoom back out. Still requires knowledge of your automation library. Sometimes, as I said, you need to call it that, or you need to work with additional elements that might not have been captured. And it's functional, but in my opinion, also a little flawed because of some of the hoops that you have to jump through. So let's talk about hybridizing page object and logic function and bringing the line between the UI elements and data types, blurring them together. So, thought experiment. What is a text box? Anyone? When you think about a text box, what is it? It's a box to put text in. Functionally, though, it could be a parameter. What was that? Input field. Okay. Why don't we boil it down to what it actually is? A string. It's a string. What about a checkbox or a radio button? Boolean. Yep. There you go. What about a select box? All right. Yeah. There you go. Beautiful. Now you're seeing the magic behind this. So let's unify page objects and logic functions. We provide that beautiful object-oriented design of page object model with the benefit of logical function wrappers that makes your framework more developer friendly because they don't have to know how to use your underlying framework. They just have to know how to use strings, how to use booleans. Because interacting with your UI elements becomes as simple as booleans, strings, date time objects, integers, arrays, so on and so forth. So this reduces the amount of learning that your development team needs to do in order to develop UI tests. So they can focus on actually writing the test while you write the framework for them. And because that barrier to entry becomes so low, suddenly you're enabling instant automation because it is just that lightning fast to interact with. And you're also reducing your maintenance costs because you're actually the one updating it. Everyone else is focused on building tests. So you drop it down from your typical like 8 to 13 when you think about building a Selenium UI automation framework down to 1 to 3 story pumps. So let's look at this. Okay. I'm going to zoom in on the code again. This is the same test from both the page object and logical function model slides. This is probably what you want to be able to develop, right? Because all you do is you declare your driver, you declare your form, and then you just fill it out like you would using standard data types. And so, easy to read, easy to maintain. What driver? What element? You see an element being referenced here? No, you're just seeing standard data types. So we said basic native data types, still Selenium or whatever game driver, or sorry, not game driver, UI automation framework you're using under the hood. Still the same code, just represented differently. Also, another benefit of this design is that you can have your values evaluated in real time. And I can show you that when we get to the actual demo. It does have some drawbacks though. So your framework does start to get a little bit more complex because you're declaring not just your element, but you're also declaring those wrappers around it. You might also have to design special objects to interact with those elements in a way that enables this. And at that same time, you're also getting that benefit of being able to be more accessible to people. There's also a lot of upfront dev time. So when you're thinking about spinning up one of these frameworks, you're putting a lot more effort into it in the beginning of the framework. But then that cost to maintain drops. So it's a question of where do you want that to go? Do you want that to go into the front or back? And chances are you probably want to go into the front because that's a one-time deal. You're just spending that time building the initial framework. After that, you are just maintaining. So again, I didn't really test this on a projector, but let's take a look at how this might actually work. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on some of these, so don't worry. Let's talk about how your UI element might work as a string. So in this case, we declare our one element. Now in this case, I have a special secondary wrapper here that just basically allows me to return either none if the element is not on the page, or returns the element if it's there. This is just specifically for checking to see if the element is on the page. It makes it easier. You don't have to like write a whole bunch of like special code to say, is this page or is this visible? You just say, is this none? Great, work with it. Or if not, then work with it. If not, then figure it out. But then as you can see here, we have two parts of the property. The getter to set the value, or to get the value, and a setter to set the value. Suddenly, this enables you to use this text box exactly as a string. Likewise, a date time. In this case, same paradigm where you have our element being captured, and then we have a getter and a setter. And the getter and setter, all that's doing is like performing special logic in order for you to use that datetime object. Again, let's take a look at another example. In this case, as a Boolean, once again, this one is actually a little bit of a special case because I have something called a checkable element. It's a custom object I had to create in order to get this done, because the page we're about to see being tested actually has two different elements you need to interact with in order to interact with a checkbox or a radio button. Fascinating stuff. But then, as you can see here, we just have our getter setter, and it suddenly then works exactly like you would a normal Boolean. This is that custom check element. So as you can see here, you get an ID and the WebDriver. And then all it's going to do is specify those two elements, your input element and your label element, and that's going to interact with it to say if it's checked or if you need to click it. And that's how you basically set that property. Now a couple more, and then we'll get into the demo. That's going to be great. Okay. This is the select element as a string. Again, you see it's the same paradigm, Capture the element, and then your properties to work with. And this is the custom select element code that basically powers them. And in this case, you might be thinking, Sophia, they have select element built into Selenium. Why don't you just use that built-in function? And again, the website we're about to test has some weird paradigms in it where they are not using standard UI elements. They built custom ones. And so I had to build this in order to accommodate for that special case. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But this same concept applies. You could still use the same select element built into Selenium to do this. And it would just look like this without capturing it as a custom select element. And now this is a very long piece of code, but this is a multi-value text box. But it treats it as a list or an array of strings. And it's very simple. If you look at code, in this case, we capture our element. We capture then a list of items in that element, in which case our subjects. Then we create some models from them. And then finally, we have our subjects that is a multi-value text box class, but that acts as a string in Python. And then this is the code right here to actually do them. And as you can see here, it's implemented exactly as you would a list. a custom list object. Okay. Now I talked a lot about code. You want to see this in action? So I'm going to go ahead and switch over here. This is a terminal. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The demo that I have set up, all you have to do is say make shell. And that is going to spin up the website under test. And boom, here we go. Put this up just a little. So let's try first. Okay, so first we have two different types of the page. We have the standard practice form, which is just basically built on page object, on your standard page object model. And so what I'm going to try to do first is work with first name. How might I do that? Okay, well, I see that there's a first name here on the page. Let's take a look at that. Okay, we have first name element. Now, if I want to try to set that, of course, I can't just do like first name equals Sophia. It's going to get mad. It's going to be like, I don't know, you can't do that on an element. Are you silly? So what I might have to do, if I'm a developer, how do I work with this? Okay, in this case, oh, there's a lot of properties here, aren't there? Now I have to find the right one to work with it. Of course, it turns out send keys is that, and I can, send keys. There we go. It says Sophia. Might need to just zoom in a little bit on this. Okay. Cool. Let's try that with the hybrid page object model, though. So in this case, I have one that's called a hybrid practice form. Let's just set the first name on here to, boom. You can see here, evaluate just like a string. And I can also check that to see if that's set by just saying first name. And then boom, we get that. Now, I talked about these elements being evaluated in real time. If I were to go in here and change this to, say, Lila, suddenly, that is just updated because it's pulling directly from the page, pulling directly from the web element. And I can do that with all sorts of things. Now, as I was talking to you earlier, I was talking about these elements here, these gender elements, the hobby elements. These are your text, your radio boxes, your check boxes. Let's go ahead and try to work with it. So let's start with the standard burst. So in this case, we have the female gender element, but we actually have two elements. Because as I said, there's two different elements you need to work with. So if I try to click the standard gender element, which this element right here, it represents the actual radio button. If I try to click that, Slam crashes. Slam's like, nope, I can't work with that. Because the driver cannot, for whatever reason, reach that to click it. So that's why I had to specify something called a click element, which is just a standard web element. In that case, boom, I clicked it. And now to check the value of that, I'm going to have to go back to my gender element here and do a is select. That's a lot of work, isn't it? What if we were to do this in hybrid page object model and say, in this case, let's change the gender to male. Okay. And then I can change it to other here and see. Yeah, male spouse. Cool. All right. One more thing that I kind of want to show you here on this page is these city state elements. Now, as I was saying, these are not your typical select elements. These are actual custom elements built by the page itself. In this case, these different options are all custom. They're all div elements, but good luck trying to inspect them because as soon as you try to. So in this case, if you want to work with it, you're going to have to actually build and work with your with other elements that you can't capture on the page, on your page object. You probably could, but it would be flaky at best. But I'm just going to jump right into the hybrid page object model here, where I am. If I want to just set the state, all I have to do is say state equals Haryana. So yeah, that's selected. I didn't have to do anything except specify it. And that is all the power of this particular paradigm. So as a developer, you can come in here and you can work with this page. This page is just basic data types, but under the hood, it's all that Selenium goodness powering it. I probably shouldn't walk away from that. But I hope this kind of shows the beauty of something like this. Last thing I want to do is just show you, I have this little thing here called demo whatnots. There is actually a function that I built to work with this form directly. Both pages have it. But I'm going to show you just the one on the page, the hybrid page object model. That's all that function is. It takes all your different parameters, but then all it's going to do is like spit that out onto the form. And so if I were to dump that into here, I have all these different parameters. My subjects is a list of strings. My hobbies, even though it's a bunch of booleans, are actually just strings as well. But let's go ahead and work with it. I might get a little mad here because some of the elements were off the page. If you're familiar with at all with how Selenium works, Selenium really wants the element to be in the viewport. So we had a little issue where the elements weren't in the viewport. So it did crash once it tried to select these, but that's okay. Hopefully it gives you an idea of like what we're actually doing here and how easy it is to work with the hybrid page object function. So I'm going to go back to my presentation here real quick, just to wrap up. Why use this paradigm? Your benefits include a large initial cost, but low maintenance cost. It's easy to read, maintain, and understand. It's accessible to your developers at any skill level or specialization. And it's fast and efficient, as you saw. It's compatible. Any object-oriented language. That's Python, Swift, C#, TypeScript, Java, JavaScript. I have implemented very similar frameworks in all these different languages. Any element-based UI automation, and even some that aren't, as long as you can like flip that dependency and create elements classes. But of course, this includes like Selenium, Appian, Game Driver, as well as XCTest, XCUI, Microsoft UI, PyCoco, and so on. And of course, any operating system, Mac, Linux, Windows, iPad, iOS. And so that's my presentation. Meet the artist. I am Sophia McKeever, 10 years as an SDET. My employers have included the Pokemon Company International, Apple, Microsoft, Datasphere. I'm a digital artist. I am a vintage computer enthusiast, and I am autistic with a deep special interest in UI automation. So please feel free to come talk to me. I will yak your ear off. If you want to download this code, here you go. Take a quick screenshot. I will also dump that link into the chat here in a moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break.